Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's review we're going to be taking a look at none other than the Chaos Bringer, the Planet Eater, the Transformers, War for Cybertron, Haslab Unicron, the biggest and most ambitious Transformers product ever created by Hasbro, and my goodness what a piece he is. This is by far the biggest, most impressive and heaviest product that I own in my entire collection, and for those of you who have backed this figure, you are going to be in for an absolute treat when you do indeed receive it. Of course, the figure is not 100% perfect, and some may say for the price point that it should be, but for a Hasbro product, honestly, I am blown away. This figure here is remarkable. You can see that as far as his scale is concerned, he couldn't even fit in my normal review station, so I do apologise for this makeshift setup. I do hope to show the figure off in as much detail with the setup that I do have available. Even with reading some of the facts and seeing some of the in-hand images of this figure, none of them prepared me for how big he actually is when you do get him in hand. Here for the Planet mode, Unicron is a whopping 30 inches as far as the diameter is concerned. The planetary rings themselves are definitely a sight to behold, and the figure is 16 pounds, so will certainly require the use of the included display base to actually stand him up here in Planet mode. So with all that being said, we have so much to cover within this review. Let's take a look at Unicron's accessories. And so, taking a look here at Unicron's accessories, the first I will show off is the included to scale Autobot shuttle. As far as the detail and paintwork is concerned for this piece, I believe it has turned out exceptionally well. You can see the boosters here at the back. These sections have been picked out in a really nice metallic silver, as so has the front section here of the cockpit. We have also got some nice silver details here at the top, and as we flip it to the underside, you can once again see that surface detail retained. Something which is worth noting for this piece and some other areas of Unicron is that the colour and paint does differ from some of the initial promotional images, as well as some of the actual videos that we have seen throughout the last 18 months. Some may say that is a major negative here with this figure, and in some instances it is, especially as far as the maw and the unpainted teeth are concerned. Although here for the Autobot shuttle, you can see that some areas have been completely painted in silver, whereas they were just a mere orange plastic on the original release. I personally would have loved to have seen this silver paint here used for the actual teeth of Unicron, but regardless, we'll go into more detail when we actually do take a look at Unicron's head. We of course do get included a transparent display stand, and this will house both the shuttle as well as the two included minifigs of both Galvatron and Hot Rod. These two figures also differ from the original promotional images, however, due to their scale and due to me unlikely using these for display, I personally don't really have much of an issue with these, but you can see that as far as the detail is concerned, I believe it has turned out really nicely, especially there for Hot Rod, although for Galvatron he does just look like a purple blob, which is rather unfortunate. But of course, turning here to the main event itself, here we have Unicron's head. Now I have decided to actually detach it from the main body. You can transform Unicron with this attached, although when you are transforming Unicron there is a top panel that has a tendency to collapse, and as this entire top section here of Unicron's head is painted, I do fear that it could potentially chip the paint, so just to preserve the paint applications, I always decide to actually remove the head, and I've got to say, as far as the display piece is concerned, it looks magnificent. It can simply just detach here from the transparent base, which is designed to give you his look from the end of the 86 movie, when he is of course defeated by the Autobots. You can see that as far as the detail is concerned for this, it looks fantastic, really well done, and I love the metallic silver that we have here for the faceplate and all of the surface detailing. Something which is unfortunate, however, is that they have decided to leave the tongue as well as the teeth here unpainted, something which we have only just become aware of by having this figure in hand. Up until this point, all of the images, all of the videos depicted this here as being silver, so it is really unfortunate that on the finished product they did slightly cheap out, and for a figure which costs close to $600, you would definitely expect this area here to have some silver paint applications. But regardless, the mouth here does have the capability of opening and closing, and the teeth here are spring-loaded, so you can definitely really collapse that jaw. As we turn around here to the back, you can once again see some fantastic sculpt work, as well as a switch here which I'll demonstrate its use later on in the review. As we take a look here towards Unicron's horns, you can see that the sculpt work on these two have come out really nicely, and it is worth noting that the horns are indeed cast in orange plastic, whereas this region here is painted in orange. On camera there is showing to be a slight difference, however in person, under normal lighting, I can assure you that the colour is pretty much spot on. So I do have to give credit to Hasbro, they have definitely done their research as far as the colour matching is concerned, and the overall colour of the figure. Something which does actually differ from the original images is the shade of orange that they have used, and I've got to say that the orange that they've gone for the main figure looks a lot closer to the actual animation. But getting into the actual head's features, to begin with, you're going to want to take the side of Unicron's faceplate and just detach this entire section here which once removed will indeed reveal some fantastic internal detailing of his face. And my goodness, the sculpt work on this piece here looks fantastic. You can see Unicron's eyes there clearly picked out in a green, and if you do utilize the switch here at the back, he does have the capability of actually looking left to right, which whilst may be slightly useless for some collectors, I find this to be a great play feature. We also do have the capability of swapping Unicron's chin out, so here I have the more iconic goatee style of chin piece, and this chin is definitely my preferred, but in order to remove this, it simply just slides off via these slots, and of course the tab here on the interior. We of course do get included a battle damage faceplate, and much like the regular faceplate, the detail as well as the paintwork on this is fantastic. I would definitely recommend taking caution whilst handling these, as they are completely transparent and have been painted over the top, so these are definitely going to be a little more fragile in comparison to some of the solid pieces, so definitely just take caution when handling this figure. Just to demonstrate the alternate chin piece, you can see that this one here is a little more generic as far as its design is concerned, although has too been painted and sculpted really well. And then of course we can take the battle damage faceplate, just snap that there over the top, and once again this here looks fantastic. And as far as the sculpt work is concerned, this is by far my preferred piece out of the two. Whilst utilizing this one, of course we do have the two holes in Unicron's eyes where the Autobots do fly in and fly out towards the end of the movie, and if you do utilize the switch, you can see the eyes rotating left to right in there, which is really awesome, although I would have loved to have seen an LED function so that they could have actually shone through the transparent plastic so that you could have seen their movement a little better when utilizing both of the faceplates. So overall, as far as the accessories and of course the head is concerned, I believe Unicron here comes with pretty much everything that I would want, and as far as the head sculpt is concerned, I think it looks fantastic. Now, taking a look here at Unicron in the planet mode, not only is this figure on a grand scale, but the sculpted in detailing as well as the paintwork make this, in my opinion, one of the best sculpted Hasbro products that we have ever gotten. The actual surface detailing to the planet itself is so impressive. I have just been admiring all of the fantastic panel lining detail, as well as some of the towers and the spikes that are situated on Unicron. The colour scheme is perfect. I love the blend of course, the darker blue, the lighter shades of blue, the silver, as well as the orange highlights, and we also do actually have a few different tones of orange. So taking a look here at the front of Unicron's mouth, or I guess you could call it the maw, you can see how we do have two different tones, a much lighter shade of almost yellow here for these sections, and then of course the darker orange around the circular piece. You can also see that the claws here at the front have been cast out of an orange plastic, and much like I mentioned when we took a look at Unicron's head, I really do believe Hasbro have done a spot-on job in colour matching the cast plastic to the painted plastic. Now of course we can't talk about Unicron's mouth without mentioning the elephant in the room, and that's that the final product unfortunately does have a slightly unfinished feel to it. You can see that here for this inner section they have decided to completely cast this here in blue plastic, and I have no idea as to why this was. All of the images and the videos that showed Unicron up until the very last production update did show him having a yellow maw, and of course that is what we saw in the original 86 movie, so I personally am completely baffled as to why they decided to change this last minute, as not only is it one of the major design aspects of this character. When you look at Unicron, you are immediately drawn to the centre of his maw, but it just looks unfinished and is really bad in my opinion. Now I must state that in person it does not look nowhere near as bad as some of the in-hand images do show it to be. Now I do put that down to perhaps me being so impressed with the detail that in the grand scheme of things I do find it to be something that I can easily overcome, but the figure has now started to release, so unfortunately I don't feel as if though Hasbro are going to offer any type of replacement piece, and I have actually looked at the back and of course the front, and there doesn't appear to be any easy access to actually getting to this piece without damaging one of the special features. So getting into the special features, if you take this section here and turn it clockwise, you will indeed open Unicron's mouth, which I have got to say looks fantastic and is something that I have been continuously doing ever since getting this figure in hand. And not only does it reveal some fantastic sculpt work in the interior, much like we saw in the movie where those two sections would chomp and destroy the planet, but it also does create a very aggressive look for the character, as all of the teeth are now protruding forwards as if they're about to consume a planet, and I just think it's super cool. Of course, if you had anything to scale with Unicron that was circular in its design, you could probably get it housed in the mouth, and as these sections here are articulated, you could bring these closer in order to create a very authentic look to what we actually saw in the movie, although I just cannot help but wonder how much cooler this would have looked if this entire section had been cast out of orange plastic. We can of course close it by turning it here anti-clockwise, and it's really easy to use. You can see that you can simply just rotate it left, rotate it right, and the mouth will open and close, and it is just so cool. Now, taking a look at the shape of Unicron in planet mode, I find it to be remarkable that Hasbro and Takara Tomy were able to engineer a fully transformable figure that can convert into a complete sphere. They really have done a fantastic job. As far as the proportions are concerned, there are no gaps in this piece at all. It is a perfect circular ball and it looks fantastic. Not to mention that he also has an incredibly impressive planetary ring, a design trait of the character that I personally find becomes overlooked, and I've got to say that Hasbro have once again done a fantastic job. I have seen some complaints in regards to the planetary rings having some hollow gaps, but for me, I find that it adds more detail, and if it were to be a solid piece of plastic, I'm pretty certain it would have been easier to break than compared to the finished product, as these hollow gaps do actually allow for a little more flexibility if you do actually bump into the rings, something which I have done multiple times when transforming him, and of course just working my way around the planet. And I must mention that not only is Unicron painted and detailed impeccably well from a front perspective, but even from the side, they've done a terrific job with the paintwork as well as the sculpt work, and even taking a look at the underside and of course the back of Unicron, it too all looks fantastic. So overall, as far as the planet mode is concerned, if we did not have that critique with the colorization of the Maw, I would be incredibly confident in saying that it is pretty much perfect. However, as it stands, it's not 100%, although actually having the figure in hand, I certainly am incredibly impressed by it. Here for a quick size comparison, we have Haslab Unicron compared next to the Titan class Combiner Wars Devastator, the Studio Series 86 movie Hot Rod, the New Age Galvatron, as well as Primus, and you can see that Unicron absolutely towers and pretty much dwarfs anyone. He is, as mentioned, the biggest Hasbro Transformer of all time, so anything released by Hasbro is automatically towered over by Unicron, and once again, I just have to state how impressive Unicron is, especially when compared to some of the other high-end Hasbro products. Now, turning to Unicron's transformation, an area which I know many of you will be intrigued to see how it actually all plays out, I have got to say that for the most part, Haslab Unicron does appear to be a shell former, which I'm pretty certain will put many of you off, although when comparing Haslab Unicron to the third-party alternative, that being the Studio Cell Unicron, I can safely say that this version by Hasbro is so much more enjoyable to handle. I have actually found myself transforming him from planet to robot mode and vice versa multiple times, and each time it has been an incredibly enjoyable experience. There is no point where I become frustrated with the transformation. Everything works incredibly smoothly, all of the panels clip together, and overall, despite it perhaps not being as clean as the Studio Cell version, I find this here to be better, as the enjoyability factor is leaps and bounds more when comparing my experience to Studio Cell Unicron. I'm pretty certain that will be a statement that is very controversial amongst many of you, but I've always found that if a product is more enjoyable, already it defeats all of its other competitors, regardless of how screen accurate they may or may not be. We have also got to factor in that this here is an officially licensed Hasbro and Takara Tomy product, so Hasbro still have to follow safety protocols. With the Studio Cell Unicron, I found myself becoming incredibly frustrated with it due to how much force you would require to actually snap panels in. You would continuously scratch yourself up due to the materials used, and just overall, I find this figure here to be a lot more enjoyable. So with all that being said, let's get down to the transformation sequence, which will actually be split into individual segments so that you can get a better appreciation of what I am actually doing. And so, with the transformation complete, here we have the Chaos Bringer Unicron, fully transformed up into his incredibly impressive robot mode. Now, for those of you who wanted a more detailed, talked through transformation sequence, do not worry, I shall be posting a transformation sequence from planet mode to robot mode and from robot mode into planet mode just after this review here goes out, so please be sure to check out that video if you want my commentary on the transformation. But just a few points, as you could probably tell, for the most part, Haslab Unicron is indeed a shell former. You could essentially take all of the planet mode pieces off his robot mode and you would not affect the core robot at all. Some may say that to be lazy engineering. Personally, I'm not entirely sure how Hasbro would actually hide the kibble unless they were to perform black magic like we saw with the Studio Cell version, which, as mentioned previously, was a horrendous transformation to actually go through. And I personally find the transformation for Haslab Unicron to be leaps and bounds more enjoyable than his third-party offering. But nevertheless, getting back here to Unicron himself, you can see that the figure is enormous. Upon transforming him for the first time, I was mind blown, not only at the sheer height of the figure, but also how wide he actually gets. When you do peg those planetary rings onto the shoulders, width-wise, he's probably the same size as a Titan class figure, so certainly enormous. His presence is unmatched. I own nothing in my collection that can come close to demanding the presence that Haslab Unicron does. So, without further ado, let's bring him in and take a closer look at the detail. Starting off firstly by taking a look here at Unicron's head sculpt. As I have already previously discussed this in detail in the accessory segment, I shall very briefly give you some of my thoughts of it here in robot mode. I believe it looks fantastic as far as the colorization is concerned, as well as the detail and the overall proportions. I believe it suits the body perfectly well. Something which is worth noting, however, is that when you do open Unicron's mouth, seeing as the teeth are unpainted, they definitely do stand out a lot more here than compared to when we just had the head on its own pegged onto the stand. I really have no idea as to why Hasbro did decide to cheap out and leave the teeth blue, and after this review I shall certainly be painting the teeth and the tongue in the metallic silver that it was supposed to have. Something else that is also worth mentioning is that if you do decide to leave Unicron's head attached during transformation, you will have to take the horns here and just rotate these sections down to allow for some additional clearance. However, do not worry, I shall mention this as well as show this off in as much detail as I possibly can when I do my upcoming detailed transformation tutorial on getting Unicron from planet to robot, and then of course robot to planet mode. You can also see that we have the neck brace here, which in my opinion is better proportioned than compared to what we got with the Studio Cell version. And then as we take a look here towards Unicron's shoulders, I love the shade of orange that they have indeed cast these in. The overall colorization of the figure looks leaps and bounds better than compared to some of the original promotional images, and it's just such a shame that they did not keep the yellow more and the silver teeth, as the figure would have been pretty much flawless as far as paintwork is concerned. Also worth mentioning is that upon getting Unicron out of the packaging and transforming him into robot mode, you will have to insert various different screw covers. However, the instructions are incredibly detailed on how to do so. For comparison, this here is a screw cover, whereas this section is actually the solid cast plastic, and in my opinion there is literally next to no difference. So as far as that is concerned, I believe they've done a fantastic job. Turning our attention here down to Unicron's torso, this has got to be the most visually appealing aspect of the entire character's robot mode. I love all of the colours that we have here. I was incredibly surprised to see that this colour of blue that we see here is indeed the base colour of plastic that this entire torso has. So the red, the yellow, the orange, everything that you see that is not blue is indeed paint. So the silver is paint, and I just think it looks fantastic. You can also see that there are no paint bleeds, as you would expect from such a premium product. Turning our attention here down to the lower skirt section of Unicron, this too has been cast out of blue plastic, although the silver paintwork truly does look fantastic, as so does the exceptional sculpt work. I do know there will be many of you who perhaps are not a huge fan of the sculpt work, as of course the original G1 designs were rather clean as far as their surface detailing was concerned. However, for someone who loves sculpting and detailing, this figure here truly is an eye feast. As we turn our attention here to Unicron's forearms, once again the sculpted in surface detailing truly is a sight to behold. You can also see some of the screw covers which seamlessly peg into their hollow gaps, and I think they look fantastic. We have got some subtle highlights here of a lighter shade of blue just to pick out some of the sharper details of the sculpt, and of course better match his character model. And I love how they have used a slightly more firmer plastic for these towers slash spikes on the side, and they are nowhere near as rubbery as you would expect from a Hasbro product. You can just see that as bending them, they will bounce back into place, and I love that touch. Taking a look here at Unicron's hands, the sculpt work on these truly is mesmerizing. As we take a look at the back of them, you can see how this has been completely painted in silver. Unfortunately, unlike some of the initial promotional images, Unicron does have grey fingers, which to me is not a massive drawback, at least nowhere near as big of a drawback as the unpainted silver teeth, but the sculpt work definitely does more than make up for it. You can see how crisp and precise this looks. These look so menacing and incredibly pointy, not to mention that they are also incredibly articulated. However, we shall discuss that in the articulation segment. As we move down to the lower thigh section, you can see that once again the sculpt work is impeccable. They have also gone the extra mile to actually paint all of these sections here in a darker yellow, something which they really didn't have to do as it is quite a subtle change, but I love that attention to detail. We of course do have some metallic silver highlights here, and it really does look fantastic. You can also see some interior detailing to the inner section of the thigh, and that does also continue here for the outer section as well as the back of the legs as well. So truly an incredibly detailed piece, and no area in my opinion has gone untouched. And so wrapping up for detail, here we have the lower section of Unicron, and once again, much like the rest of the figure, it has been sculpted so well, not to mention that it also has a really nice variety of paint applications. Much like we saw with the thighs, they have indeed added a lighter shade of colour when compared to the plastic, so of course we have the darker plastic and the lighter blue here for the paint, and it looks impeccable. We also do have some nice metallic silver highlights here for the knees, and the sculpt work truly is once again a sight to behold. As we turn our attention here to Unicron's feet, the sculpt work is incredibly crisp and precise, although unfortunately, much like the hands and of course the teeth, these do differ from some of the official images in the sense that they have just been completely cast out of grey plastic and are not metallic silver, although seeing as to how he transforms and as these are the feet of Unicron, I believe it was probably a really sensible design choice, as I think they could have become easily scratched, and they haven't completely skimped out on paintwork. You can clearly see here that we do have some orange highlights in the interior as well as on the exterior. So overall, as a whole, as far as sculpt and paintwork is concerned, Haslab Unicron truly is one of the best Hasbro products that we have ever seen. Now of course, we could not discuss Haslab Unicron's robot mode without mentioning the elephant in the room, or should I say the kibble in the room. Unicron is plagued with planet mode kibble, although once again, unless this figure had a very similar transformation to Studio Cell, I'm really unsure as to how they would actually manage this kibble. This was also something that everyone who backed this figure previously knew about, so in my opinion it's not really worth complaining about, as we have known about this for roughly 18 months, and if it was that much of a drawback, I'm pretty certain that you probably didn't order it based upon this kibble. But taking a look here at the kibble, you can see how we do have the planet claws here on the side, something which is of course not accurate to the character model. We do unfortunately have the towers here on the shoulders and also some towers here on the back, which too I wish maybe could have actually collapsed into the backpack, but regardless, I believe that it just adds an extra layer of detail. Offering the back here from a different perspective, you can see how we do have so many different panels. It truly is the entire top as well as the front of the planet mode, and due to the gimmick of the opening more, I believe that it has actually amplified the kibble. But once again, all I can say is that having the figure in hand, it is nowhere near as much of an eyesore as it may come across on camera and of course in some in-hand images. And moving down to an area which I actually have more issues with than the backpack itself. Here we have the back kibble that does store on Unicron's legs. To me, I can definitely see where all of those planets are going that he is eating. These look like giant circular planets. They are enormous and are full of kibble. But once again, much like the backpack, this is something that we have known from day one, although it would have been nice to see perhaps the panels actually collapse into the inner leg. I have no idea as to why they did not do that. Perhaps the panels would have had to have multiple joints, and it could have potentially caused for a fragile piece, but as it stands, these definitely are a huge eyesore, and it certainly does help that all of the kibble is incredibly detailed, so really no matter what angle you do look at Unicron from, he is a very interesting piece to take in. Turning to Unicron's articulation, despite how colossal this figure here is in size as well as weight, he is actually incredibly articulated, and in some areas even more than a Titan class figure, which considering how much bulk he actually does have is very impressive. So we of course do get a rotation here at the head, which can look left to right. He can of course look up and down. I maybe would have liked to have seen a greater range of motion looking down, as considering he does tower over everything that I do have in the collection, it would have been nice to actually have him staring down upon some of the other figures. But regardless, we do get a hinge joint here at the mouth which can open and of course close. You may have seen during transformation that the shoulder ratchet is incredibly heavy duty, to the point where I definitely believe over time it could cause some issues regarding transformation, but regardless, regardless, we shall discuss that in my upcoming detailed transformation segment. We do get a ratchet joint which can click forwards and backwards. It could probably rotate the full 360, however, as the planetary rings are attached, I want to keep my shelf intact and do not want to knock anything down. We of course do get ratchet joints here out to the sides, and these can hinge roughly to 90, although once again, I don't want the planetary rings to actually knock into the figure's head. We do get a rotation here at the bicep, which could rotate the full 360. We do get a ratchet joint here at the elbow, which can bend to 90. And then finally, taking a look here at Unicron's hand, this can rotate the full 360. He does have a ball joint here at the thumb, as well as a hinge joint, and the fingers are loaded with articulation, so we do get 3 points per finger, one here at the base, one at the knuckle, and then one at the tip, which really does allow for some incredibly expressive poses, especially if you wished for Unicron to grasp any of your other figures. I was very surprised to see that he does have, for the most part, an uncompromised waist rotation, so this can ratchet pretty much the full rotation. I shan't be doing it in this review as I do have the stand attached, and I do not want to dislodge the back kibble, although from what I have just demonstrated, that is a good enough range of motion. The front skirt can hinge outwards, as so can the side panels, to allow for a great range of motion here at the legs. So as to be expected, the legs are on heavy duty ratchet joints, and if you do actually have the stand attached, you are able to kick one of these legs all the way forwards, and the stand will indeed actually hold the weight of the figure, which is incredibly impressive. I have actually found the included stand to be a blessing, so really grateful that they did include that. So that can kick roughly out to 90. We also do get a rotation here at the thigh, and of course a ratchet joint which could do the split. However, once again, I don't want to knock into the planetary rings. We do get a ratchet joint here at the knee which can kick roughly to 90, which, considering all of the kibble that he does have, is very impressive. And then finally, taking a look here at Unicron's feet, we do indeed get a ratchet joint which can kick forwards and backwards, mainly due to transformation. He can of course rock side to side, much like we have seen from all of the War for Cybertron figures, and he does have toe pivot both at the front and at the back. However, that once again is due to transformation. So overall, for such a big and bulky figure, I believe Haslab Unicron is amazingly articulated, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that you can actually get this figure in some fairly dynamic poses. And here, for a Haslab Unicron size comparison, we have him compared next to the Leader Class Ultra Magnus, Leader Class Earthrise Optimus Prime, as well as some of the latest Studio Series 86 movie figures, and you can see that as far as the display is concerned, he absolutely dwarfs any of these figures. As mentioned, he is the biggest Hasbro Transformer of all time, so any of the mainline figures is automatically going to be dwarfed by this behemoth, and I just love it. I believe that this is the best Unicron that we are ever going to get, and as far as the display is concerned, I really could not be any happier. I love how he looks next to some of these other Hasbro Transformers characters. And so, some final thoughts. Overall, as a complete package, I believe Haslab Unicron is amazing. I am so happy to add this figure here to my collection. He is not only the most ambitious Hasbro Transformer of all time, but in my opinion is by far one of the best, and this figure alone will go down in history. He is remarkable. Of course, not 100% perfect, and as mentioned at the beginning of this review, for the price point, I'm pretty sure that many of you believe that he should be, although I think Hasbro and Takara Tomy did a really good job. Covering the planet mode first, as far as sculpt and detailing is concerned, it is pretty much spot on to what we saw in the 86 movie. The surface detailing, the overall shape of it, as well as the planetary rings, all look remarkable. I love the opening mouth gimmick. I just think that it completely changes the overall look of Unicron, and I'm so glad that they did add that feature. Of course, there is one major drawback to the planet mode, and that is the unpainted mouth, and I have no idea as to why that area did go unpainted. I personally wouldn't think that Hasbro would leave that unpainted without there being a substantial reason, whether that to be down to the materials. I really hope that they didn't just cheap out and that there is a bigger reason behind it, but setting that off to the side, as it is something that I have easily been able to overcome, I think he looks great. The transformation is leaps and bounds more enjoyable than compared to the Studio Cell version. Of course, due to it not being as complex, it ultimately does not result in as clean of a figure as that third-party offering, although in my opinion creates for an equally, if not better looking robot mode, as the sculpting and detailing, the paintwork all looks phenomenal. The back kibble is not a big deal at all for me, as it is something that we have known from the get-go. The very first images of Unicron did show his back kibble, so it was something that I got over before actually getting this figure in hand. I was so surprised to see how well articulated he is. I think he comes with a great slew of accessories, and I love all of the gimmicks gimmicks that they have packed into the head, such as the detachable feature, the removable faceplate, the interior detailing, the articulated eyes, the swappable battle damage pieces, as well as the alternate chin pieces. My major gripe here for robot mode is not the back kibble or the leg kibble, it is indeed the unpainted silver teeth, and I definitely put this down to budgetary constraints, and for a figure which costs close to $600, this should have been an area that was painted. After this review, I will definitely be taking some silver paint and finishing him off, as I think it will just complete his overall look. As far as the presence and the scale and the height and the material is concerned, I find him to be one of the most, if not the most impressive collectible that I currently own. The figure feels so well built, there are no stress marks, the paint applications have been applied so crisp and precisely, the sculpt work is immaculate, all of the joints have fantastic tolerances. Overall, it's just a very, very good product, and for those of you who have backed Unicron, you are certainly in for a treat when you do indeed receive him. So with all that being said, that just about wraps up my review. If you haven't guessed already, I am so impressed with this figure and would love to know down in the comment section below your thoughts on him. And if you did back Unicron, are you excited to receive him? And if you did not back Unicron, will you be looking into ways of actually purchasing him? Of course, as he was a part of the crowdfunding campaign, it will be rather difficult to track him down for a reasonable price, although all I will recommend is to keep a lookout, especially on eBay, as you never know, someone may list one for retail price. I really hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, please do let me know down in the comment section below. Of course, let me know on what you think of the figure himself. I thank you all for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.